as I said earlier, we are kind of compared to the map that we have, we're putting tending the civic soil where we are in our ordering of discussion because this is one of those years where tending the civic soil is very relevant. We have an election season coming up. Other years, you might think about using it in what we would term the end, near the end of the Christian year, right? In September or so, ahead of the first Tuesday in November. But we wanted to make sure that we kind of presented this to you in this way, and first following lunch, because it might be the one with the fastest turnaround time for you. um, I want to take a moment every time I think about health. Like if somebody asks me and says, do you feel healthy? There are things that I think about first. I think about, are my allergies out of control or are they under control? That's a big one for me. And then I might think, does anything in my body hurt today? Or does everything kind of feel like it's moving and working okay? And then I might think about, if I'm in a really good place and I'm really contemplating that question, I might think about, do I feel at peace? Does my mind feel at peace? Or do I feel some kind of stress or tension somewhere in my mind or my body? And each of these things is a my statement. It is a personal health issue, right? But when we start to look at those personal health issues in conversation with public health, we begin to recognize that each of these individual realities of health have a social link. Do I have access to reasonably priced allergy medications that work for me? Are the construction companies that are currently building mini houses around where I live, are they required to use materials that don't pollute the air? Are they required to use practices that don't pollute the air and therefore don't worsen my allergy symptoms? Do I have access to health insurance and health providers, healthcare providers, so that I can get immediate help if I am in pain? Do I feel safe in my community and therefore at peace in myself? The technical language for that is what we discussed earlier, the social determinants of health. Each of these social determinants impact our individual health and the health of our communities. And each of these social determinants of health are impacted by decisions that our elected officials make. As we've seen over the past several election cycles in our country, political ads, social media posts, so many social media posts, speculation from all sides, and rampant drama seems to dominate our election seasons. And given this turbulent environment, preaching about elections and voting during election season, or maybe any time, can feel especially daunting. So we offer Tending the Civic Soil to give you, the preacher, a resource to address election season with intention, action, and compassion. Tending the Civic Soil does not focus on certain policies, perspectives, or candidates. Rather, it approaches the process of preparing to vote and voting as part of community health. If we imagine that our communities are like plots of land, how healthy is our soil? Is the soil ready to produce our desired future together? Or is it thin and in need of an infusion of cooperation, justice, and reconciliation? I want to, with this particular one, give you a little bit of a roadmap for how it looks. Similar to a couple of the sermon series we will discuss later, this one does not necessarily follow a particular narrative or a particular book of the Bible, but draws from various sources, narratives, and teachings within the Bible to help us explore what it means to create healthy civic soil. Week 1 invites us to think about voting as a plant in the community soil. When we work toward being a healthy, cooperative community, voting adds fruit that moves us toward our desired future together. When it's unhealthy, election season can contribute to further divisiveness in our communities. So we want to explore a faithful Christian response as focusing on the strengthening of our relationships with each other to improve the health of the soil. Elections, to be clear, are again plants in the soil. They only reflect who we choose to be as a community. Weeks 2 and 3 then explore how we tend our civic soil. Week 2 uses Paul's metaphor of planting and watering in 1 Corinthians 3 as a way to recognize that our interdependence is necessary for our freedom. I want to note here and just put a pin in it. 1 Corinthians 3 comes back in the God's Temple Sermon Guide, which I think is just the beauty of our scriptures in being able to say many things through one passage. Week 3 then engages the story of Esther to explore the call that each of us has to speak out against injustice and prioritize justice during election seasons. And then week 4 invites congregations to the work of reconciliation through the story of creation in Genesis 2. In elections, we have winners and losers. Healthy civic soil requires reconciliation so that we can all work together to contribute to the health of the community. While tending the civic soil is written particularly for election season, I want to note that the notions of a healthy civic environment, valuing our interdependence, prioritizing justice, and working towards reconciliation across our differences, these are all themes that appear throughout the other sermon guides as well. When we invite our congregations to build stronger communal ties as a faithful response to elections, we help them invest in the cultivation of communal health that can reap a harvest far beyond the first Tuesday of November every other year. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Reverend Adam Barlow Thompson. I just have to name, Adam is the one who got me into this, and I love it, and I'm so glad that he did. But the neighboring movement and Adam and his team there were really instrumental in putting together Tending the Civic Soil a couple years ago. So I wanted Adam to come and share with us about some things that he would want to highlight for you within this sermon guide.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And it's good to see all of you. And thanks for considering these worship resources in your congregations. What I think is really wonderful about the way that the Health Fund put these together with Lisa's help is that these are really pastor friendly. And so if you are a worship planner, I hope that you'll receive these as kind of a gift to, take a chunk of really good, well-researched stuff that you don't have to do all the work for. So much of it's just there for you already. And that's what's really great about it, I think. The Tending the Civic Soil materials was written in particular it was written during the 2020 election, which was highly contentious, as you may remember. And we were trying to thread that needle of how do we talk about this in our congregations, knowing that I'm assuming most of us on this call, or maybe all, are United Methodist. And that means most of our congregations have people of different political stripes in the same church. And that is, I think, something that we hold as a value in this material. And I hope that you, as the preacher, get to nuance when then you talk about this in your local setting. And the way that we kind of tried to thread that needle was to take some of the focus off of the election itself and put it onto the soil, is the metaphor that we used. It turns out, and this isn't surprising, but even if your preferred political party wins the election, that doesn't necessarily mean that your community immediately is healthy or unhealthy, right? And so there's a lot of other things that are part of that. And we know that communities that have, like if you check out the county health ranking statistics, the counties that have better health rankings also have better voter turnout. The counties that have worse health rankings also have worse voter turnout. So there is a correlation. We don't necessarily know the causation piece, which one came first, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that communities that are healthy, part of what's making them healthy is that everyone there knows that they are an active participant and that their role matters in that community. And that's what the Tending the Civic Soil is trying to do around voting, to say what makes us healthy is when we are actively engaged, we're aware, we know what's going on, and we're pulling those things together. The material was written in partnership with the Voter Network, which is a nonprofit here in Kansas. I know not everyone on the call is from Kansas, but if you are from Kansas, you'll see some overlap with that work. The Voter Network has a tool called Voter to Voter. It's a online tool that helps people remind folks to vote in a nonpartisan way. It's a helpful tool for churches because it's peer-to-peer. So you're never contacting strangers. It's really just helping you contact friends, people in your network who you already know, and reminding them to vote. And so it's a good way to overlap the material. If you're in Kansas, that works. If you're in Nebraska, there are other tools, but that one is linked to the Kansas election cycles, so it doesn't necessarily work the same in Nebraska. The only other thing I would say about all of these materials is that I just want to compliment Lisa, because I don't know anybody in the world who understands and can talk about the Bible in a relatable way other than Lisa Hancock. And so the exegesis in these materials is so good. And I wish that I had Lisa just to do that for every sermon that I ever preach. That would be wonderful. And so I would just highly recommend that, and it'll be a good use for you. So I think that's all. I don't know, Lisa, is there anything else you want me to say or other compliments I could give you?
Well, I didn't bring you here to give me compliments. I do very much appreciate them. No, because we have a little time, I can share with y'all just a little bit. Adam has heard me say this so many times, and the team at the Health Fund has heard me say this so many times. I am an organist by training as a musician, and I had an organ professor tell me at one time, the best thing you can be is not fantastic or great. The best thing you can be is useful. And so my goal has been to really participate in making these incredibly useful. And it is gratifying every time I hear that it has been useful, because it feels like the job has been done. And I always want to hear from y'all if it's not useful, and if something else would have been, or a different way of approaching it could have been useful in your communities. That's also part of what we like to hear. So thank you, Adam. I'm trying to think. You, Adam, were part of implementing this sermon guide, or at least the first sermon in a local congregation in Kansas. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so we did, I think this was the first sermon guide that the Health Fund put out. And I did actually, I preached the first week of this at a church here in Wichita. And if anybody's interested, I do have that video. Actually, I could actually send it to you. I'd have to do a little looking, but I do have it somewhere. So yeah, so you can even, get if you think my preaching is inspirational, then you could definitely look there. If that's not helpful, it's totally good. Oh, look, Lindsay already said it's already on the page, so it's available to all of you. So you can check that out. So yeah, I mean, and I don't know, any other questions or anything about that series? It is hard. I mean, here's what I would say. I think it's important for us as faith leaders to talk about elections, but it's also like hard. Like you have to really be really strategic about the way you do it. So, but people are thinking about it anyways. So it's something that I think we need to do.
Right. I just really appreciate that, Adam, because Adam had had the really hard job, what I think would be hard, of being the behind the scenes person who then had to actually implement it in an actual location in a real sermon. And so you can kind of, if it's helpful for you as you imagine how to use these, I think being able to say, here's what the written text was, and here's how somebody used that and put their own voice to it can be really helpful. That you obviously don't have to preach a sermon the way Adam preaches a sermon, although I think Adam probably does a great job preaching a sermon. But I do think that it is work, and I want to acknowledge the work that there is in translating material into your voice for your community. And what we've hoped to do in tending the civic soil and others is to give you tools to do that, so that that's what your focus is instead of all of the research. So that is great. I would love to open it up then, if there are any questions for me or for Adam. Any questions in general, this is a great time to do that. You can just use one of your reaction buttons and I will call on you in the Zoom. I will say, yeah, ask a question and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But oh, thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay added the link in the chat for the sermon guide. I led music for VBS yesterday, and none of the kids wanted to do the jumping in the jumping song, and so I got to be this adult jumping, trying to get the kids to jump. And so when they met with me in music, I said, give me a thumbs up, a thumbs in the middle, or a thumbs down for how you feel about jumping. So not that we are children, but sometimes it can be really helpful to know where everyone is at. Oh, we have a question from Amanda. Amanda, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about, because you said that this tending the civic soil is really designed to be kind of used in a September timeframe leading up to the election, which I think is great because it leaves time for people to actually practice that engagement that you offer them. However, one of my concerns is that we have a really, really contentious item on our August elections in the state of Kansas that I am wanting to get kind of feedback on how to make sure that this gets presented in a way that does not look like a reaction to the August election. However, that particularly the amendment to the state constitution, however that goes, because that would be really important in my congregation, that it not be seen as preaching a reaction.
Right. I will, Adam, do you mind if I chime in, and then I will hand it over to you, since you're actually living in Kansas in the current climate. What the first thing that that comes to mind is to not necessarily like get up there and name this, whatever the result is, and I don't know how you feel about it, but it is to name that tending the civic soil is made to address any number of ways that elections bring out the divisiveness in our communities. So that has already been brought out. And then you have November coming. So I think, I actually think that there's an opportunity, if you feel safe and like it's a good thing to do in your community, to name the reality that you're in, and then to move forward. And it also does not hurt to kind of name for them that you are pulling from a resource that was written several years ago. This is not you coming up with something because you're upset about what happened or you're happy about what happened. This is using a resource, again, contextualizing it in, I'm talking about this because I want our civic soil to be good, and our elections are only a piece of what makes our civic soil healthy. Those are kind of my initial thoughts. What are your thoughts, Adam?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It is a unique space in Kansas right now because the amendment has to do with abortion, and there are people of faith on both sides speaking out pretty robustly about that. And so I think it does like add a layer of tension and like finesse that is required in preaching it. I also think that like, you know, if you're planning on doing this after the primary in Kansas this cycle, then it might be a really helpful tool, because you can start out by saying like there's been harm done over this election, winner or loser, no matter what side you were on. There's been relational harm done, and we're going to talk about this because this is what we're trying to do, is work towards that reconciliation regardless of electoral results. We're going to try to work towards that reconciliation. But Amanda, it's going to require a really awesome preacher like yourself to thread that needle well. And I mean, you guys, every congregation is different. Some of you, it won't matter if you come out and kind of name where you're at on it, because your congregation's with you and it's okay. But that's not the norm, I don't think. I mean, there's fewer of that in our state. So yeah, I mean, I think it's all a matter of context. If any of you have like, you know, you want to work through your specific context, I'd be happy to have those conversations with people too. So.
Thank you for that question, Amanda. Any other questions? Okay, well, I hope that there is a lot of fodder for you to take into your free writing practice time. Again, I'm going to invite you to kind of engage with that. Not perfection. We're not seeking perfection. We're not seeking even anything that's intelligible to anybody but you. We're just going to keep our fingers moving on our keyboard, or keep our pen moving on the paper, as we kind of get out what in tending the civic soil might be important for your congregation to hear at this time.